Welcome to my monster PC build, which I'm calling Alan Lake. This monster PC build is worth over 5,000 US dollars. So stick around to see the components I used, benchmarks and my conclusions. Okay, so first question off the bat, why did I call it Alan Lake? Well, it's because of a couple of reasons actually. One, it's the Skylake processor that I'm using inside the build. The second is that my favorite game is actually Alan Wake. Now, a lot of people haven't played this game because it was an Xbox 360 exclusive title for a while, but it did come to the PC, so if you do get a chance, check it out. And the third reason is that one of the founding members of Remedy, who created Alan Wake, is Sam Lake. Now, he was one of the lead writers on Alan Wake, and also he's working on a new game for the Xbox One called Quantum Break. So all those three things combined, that's why I called the system Alan Lake. So one of the first things that I did was choose a CPU, and I had the opportunity to go to the previous generation, but thought, why not go to the current generation? And that's why I went with the Core i7. Okay, so this is the Core i7 6700K. It runs at 4 GHz stock. At the moment I am keeping it at stock as I don't want to overclock it just yet. Now the Intel i7 6700K has 4 cores with 8 threads, so that was going to be enough for me to work with my video and also my graphic design. And recently, as in just the last couple of days, there's been a lot of stories about the Skylake brand of processors having less silicon in their wafers. So this can cause bending in the CPU itself. At the moment, I'm keeping my system pretty stationary, so I don't have a lot of fear over that, but I will tell you once I get to the CPU cooler what my thoughts are. Moving it around a little bit in the room should be okay, but if you're gonna send it out on a road trip or anything like that, throw it in the back of the car, it's probably best that you detach the CPU cooler. Okay, so the next component that I'll be looking at in this build is the RAM. I wanted to get the maximum amount of RAM into this system that I could because a lot of my applications use quite a lot of RAM. So with that being said, I wanted to aim for about 64 gig. And there are a few quad channel memory kits out there, but they weren't recommended for the Z170 board that I had. So I went with dual channel memory, which is compatible with this build. So I managed to pick up 2 kits of G.Skill Trident Z 2800 MHz DDR4 RAM with a CAS latency of 14. So you're going to get 2 16GB modules inside each kit. So once I bought 2 kits, that added up to 64 gig. Now again, I could probably overclock the DDR4 memory to higher than 2800 MHz, but at this stage, the advantages of overclocking the RAM, I'm not going to see a lot in terms of frames per second in gaming or rendering time in Adobe Premiere. Okay, so now onto the more exciting part of this build is the boot drive. And I've chosen to go with the Samsung 950 Pro M.2s. These drives are amazing. Their operating speed is at 2500 megabytes per second for read and 1500 megabytes per second on the write. So these things are absolutely flying. So initially I did have some problems setting these up as a boot drive, so I've created a separate video to show people out there what I had to do inside the BIOS to get these drives to boot. Now, I did RAID 0 these drives just to test it out and see what it was like, but for my workflow, it just wasn't needed. Pretty much it was capping out at the bandwidth limit, which was 3000 megabytes per second on the read and 3000 megabytes per second on the write. And because I was going to be operating with video files and so forth, it was only going to be transferred between itself and a NAS. So at this stage, I just thought, well, it's more beneficial for me to have the 2 drives there, one as a temp drive and one as a boot drive. So why did I choose these drives in particular? Well, I'd been eyeing off the OEM version of these drives for quite some time, and I thought, I didn't like the idea of not having a solid warranty to go with them. So I waited a little bit longer until I was ready to build the whole computer, and lucky that I did because these got announced, and as soon as they were released, I jumped on them and bought 2. So, would I recommend these drives to everyone? Not really. If you're doing a lot of design work and photo editing and audio editing and so forth, and you need that speed, then yes, these M.2 drives are perfect for you. If you're a gamer or a casual PC user, then no, I would say stick with your normal SSDs, because at the moment their pricing is really good, and the M.2s are quite expensive. So as a secondary temp drive, what I did is I opted for the Kingston HyperX Savage SSD drive. Now this operates at 560 megabytes per second on the read and 530 megabytes per second on the write. So I wasn't looking to get the M.2 speeds out of this drive, but I was looking for something that was fast enough to act as a secondary temp drive if I needed it. So usually when I'm choosing my SSD drives, I generally go for the Samsung brand. However, I've heard the good things about the Kingston HyperX Savage drives, so I thought I'd give them a shot. And this particular drive didn't disappoint. So with all that internal storage and temp drives, I needed something that I could store my rather large Steam library on. At over 1,300 games, I needed something that could hold a large amount of data. So I opted for the Seagate 5TB desktop hard drive. Now the reason I chose to go for a large external drive instead of an internal drive was primarily due to the noise factor. So when I'm wanting the PC to be really quiet, all I need to do is turn off the external 5TB drive, and it's got no mechanical drives operating in the system at all. But then I hear someone saying, well, why don't you just download the games as you need them and install them on the M.2s or the SSD inside? Well, that's a really good point. However, where I live currently, I don't have access to cable internet, and my internet is really slow. I'm talking 5 megabits per second. Now that's megabits. So the maximum that I can get out of my connection is about 500 to 600 kilobytes per second. And instead of having to worry about downloading a game from my Steam library, it's a lot easier just to install it on a 5TB external drive that I can take anywhere with me. So with all those great components, we need something to plug them all into. So for my motherboard choice, I went the ASRock Extreme 7 Plus Z170 board. So why did I choose this Z170 motherboard? Well, it's because it's got 3 M.2 slots on board. So these M.2 slots, they operate at 32 gigabits per second. So these are one of the fastest drives that you can get right now. So if you are using the M.2 slot in, say, the first one, it will take out 2 of the SATA ports and 1 of the SATA Express ports. And the same goes for the other 2 slots. So it will take away 6 SATA ports as well as 3 of the SATA Express ports. But don't stress, because there's still 4 ports left over for any SSDs that you might want to hook up. So one of the things I didn't mention earlier was the CPU cooler that I was using for the Skylake processor. And that's the Noctua NH-D15. Now, as you could see from that box, this CPU cooler is huge. But it is also one of the best CPU coolers out there on the market when it comes to air cooling. Now, I can hear it already. Why didn't you go water cool? Well, I'm not that into the whole water cooling thing. It's a little bit risky from my point of view. You know, there are people out there, enthusiasts, that love dealing with water cooling, but I don't want to push my system too hard. And the NH-D15, well, that's going to let me achieve, you know, 4.5, 4.6 gigahertz on the 6700K. So for me, there's no reason to go for a water cooling solution. Now, as I mentioned, this CPU cooler is huge, and with the recent Skylake bending chip fiasco that's going on, I'm a little bit worried. But in saying that as well, I'm not taking it out for trips, you know, taking it down to the beach to see the sunset and all that sort of thing. It's sitting here in the office and it's not going anywhere. So I'm not too concerned at this stage, but I want to see how this whole fiasco unfolds. And here is my graphics card. Look at it, it's beautiful. So this is the Asus Strix NVIDIA GTX 980 with 4GB of RAM. Now the reason I chose this graphics card is because I was looking for something silent, and the Strix model of cards don't spin up their fan until it reaches a certain temperature. Now I can already hear a few people out there going, why didn't you go TI, or what about an SLI configuration? Well, I didn't need that. It was just going to add more heat, more noise to the system. For my needs at least, I'm looking for a workstation that can do video rendering and graphic design, not something that's really a high-end gaming machine. So gaming is just a bonus for this system. It's not something that it was intended for. So now that that little rant is out of the way, the reason I chose this graphics card is because of one of the features that it offers, and that is silence. So what I mean is that if the graphics card isn't under load or isn't generating a lot of heat, then the fan doesn't actually kick in. So if I'm just doing normal day-to-day operation on the system, then the fan probably isn't going to kick in. It's only when I'm doing any gaming or rendering with video work that the fan would actually kick in. So all these great components, and we need to power it. So this is the Corsair RM750i. Now the reason I chose this one again was the silence factor. So the fan won't actually kick in until it reaches a certain temperature, which means that I'm not going to hear this whirring fan noise all day long while I'm working, unless I'm doing something really strenuous, and then it's only going to kick in and slowly ramp up. So the power supply itself is fully modular, so I only have to plug in what I need. And at this stage, with only the SATA drive, and that's pretty much it that needs powering inside the case, I don't need a lot of cables inside there, so it keeps it really nice and clean. And as a great addition, it's also got a USB port on there, which will feed any of the statistics from the power supply straight back into your computer. So you can see, okay, when is the fan kicking in? You can do fan tests and so forth. What sort of wattage is it operating at this point in time? It's really great. So with all these fantastic components so far, we need to house them somehow. So I did my research, and the case that I really was looking forward to getting was the Fractal Design Define R5. So they had a couple of color choices, and I thought, I'm going to step outside my comfort zone right now, and I went for a white case. So this case is beautiful. I could pull out all the hard drive cages that I wasn't using, and this meant that I could have better airflow inside the case. I left the stock fan right in the front so I could blow over the GPU as well as the M.2 slots, because those M.2 drives can get a little bit warm inside. So that's the intake fan, and the one on the back is the outtake fan. Now on the front of the case is a handy little switch there to change the speed of the fans. So what I've done is I've left that on quite low because it doesn't need a lot of airflow inside. If it's a particularly hot day, I can ramp that up just with the flick of a switch and change that to high, just so it keeps the air moving inside and it doesn't heat up too much. So the main reason for choosing this case was its sound deadening capabilities. So what you'll notice is that on the sides of the cases is this really dense dampening foam. Yeah, really dense dampening foam. So this helps keep all that unwanted noise inside the case instead of letting it get out. The construction of this case is awesome. It is a really well made case, and I give my hats off to Fractal Design for creating this. Now with everything inside the case and ready to go, we need something to view it on. That monitor there in the middle is the Acer G-Sync 28-inch 4K monitor, or the XB280HK. Doesn't sound as sexy. So the two monitors sitting either side of the 4K monitor are the LG 24-inch LED monitors that I had originally had for my setup. So I've just incorporated them into the build and they work really great. But back on topic, the 28-inch G-Sync monitor is brilliant. And when it comes to gaming, this monitor is smooth as butter. It operates at 60 Hz and I turn off V-Sync and G-Sync just takes over and makes it look nice and smooth. Oh yeah. So is 4K for everyone? Not at this point in time, but this monitor was at a good price. I actually got it on special, so I thought, why not jump into the 4K arena and start testing these monitors out? So now onto the other components, and we've got the Behringer Xenix Q802 USB. So this is an 8-input mixer that I'll be using for my audio and will really help improve the quality of the sound in this channel. So as a storage solution, I've gone for the Netgear ReadyNAS RN204. So inside the NAS, I've installed 4 3TB Western Digital Greens. Now I could have gone ahead and installed the Western Digital Red drives, which are NAS specific. However, I really didn't need it for my applications right now. In the future, when I need to worry more about my data, I'll definitely be looking at the Western Digital Reds. So the way that I've configured the ReadyNAS, I've set it up as a RAID 5 configuration. And what that means is basically it will take the 4 3TB hard drives, which at the moment works out at 12 TB, and it will use one of the hard drives as a parity drive. So usable space, I will only have 9 TB of space, okay? But if one of those drives fails, then all I need to do is eject it from the ReadyNAS, put in a brand new one, and it will rebuild the data. So it's just one of those safety things, just in case anything goes wrong. So that's it for the component list of this monster PC build that I've called Allen Lake. If you want to check out any of the components that I've used in this build, then go on down to the description. I've included links to all the components used, so you can just click on those and check them out for yourself. And now, onto the benchmarks! So what would this Allen Lake monster PC build be without an Allen Lake benchmark? So what I've done is I've maxed everything out at the 4K resolution, and we're getting an average of 30.7 frames per second. Even with the purists out there that feel like 60 frames per second is the frames per second to hit, I didn't feel like that at all with this game. At 30 frames per second, it ran beautifully and I didn't notice any jattering or lag. Okay, so the next game off the ranks is Tomb Raider. I've set the graphics to ultimate and that's in 4K resolution. With these settings, we're seeing an average of 33.3 frames per second. On the G-Sync monitor, this turned out brilliantly and it didn't need any more than 30 frames per second in my opinion. However, to satisfy curiosity, I have set the graphical settings now at high in the 4K resolution, and we have an average frames per second come back at 59.1. The next game up is Thief. So the first benchmark that I did was on the very high setting, and that was at 4K resolution, and we got 29.4 frames per second averaged. And just to see if we can get that above 30 frames per second, I set the settings at high, and we got an average of 36.7 frames per second. Not the best frame rates in the world, but acceptable anyway. The next game we've got up is Batman Arkham City. So with all the settings maxed out and at 4K resolution, we were getting 46 frames per second average. Now, I know this isn't 60 frames per second, but on the G-Sync monitor again, it performed beautifully. And the last game benchmark that I did was Bioshock Infinite. On the Ultra setting at 4K resolution, we were getting 40.8 frames per second on the average. Again, this wasn't at 60 frames per second, however, the game did perform very smoothly. And now onto the Heaven benchmarking tool. We're looking at the 4K resolution at a medium setting, and we're getting an average of 31.1 frames per second. And for the last benchmarking tool, I chose to go with 3D Mark. At 4K resolution on Ultra settings on the Firestrike benchmark, we didn't get a really good score at all. It came back as a score of 3090. The footage was really choppy and stuttery, and I put this down to the graphics card not being able to handle tessellation that well. So in conclusion to this video, I just want to give you some of my thoughts and experiences in this PC build, just in case you are thinking about building something similar. So the components that I've used were all selected for being the most quiet. But in saying that, I also wanted something with enough power to be able to get me through on video editing and graphic design. If I wasn't too concerned about noise and heat, then I'd go for two 980 Ti's in an SLI configuration. But at this stage, I'm more than happy with the 980. When it comes to the storage, I was going to RAID 0 the M.2 drives, but I found that I'd get much more benefit out of leaving them as single drives rather than RAIDing them. The need for transferring 3000 megabytes per second wasn't really there for me at this stage when I'm only shooting at 1080p, but as I move up to 4K video, this might be something that I'll consider in the future. Apart from those two things, this monster PC build is awesome. I've been using it for the last month or so and it is brilliant. It's really improved my loading and saving times when I'm doing my graphic design work, and video is just like butter. So if you're looking for a workhorse, then I would definitely recommend these components for your monster PC build. Well, I don't know about you, but that has to be one of the longest videos that I've made so far, and probably one of the ones that I'm most proud of. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Well, that's it for this monster PC build. I really hope you liked it. If you did, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and even leave me a comment down below. If you do enjoy the content that I'm providing here, make sure you subscribe to my channel because it really helps me a lot. And as always, imagine, learn, create. Bye!